The neon sign outside said, "Open" in red, the O flickering every few seconds like a slow heartbeat. Decker noticed it the way he noticed most things lately, dully, through glass, as if the world were a movie he'd stopped caring about. He pushed through the door, anyway, because his feet hurt and his rental had a dead battery, and the rain was the kind that found the gap between your collar and your neck, no matter what you did. The bar smelled like old wood and spilled beer and something beneath that he couldn't name. Not unpleasant, almost sweet. He took a stool near the middle of the counter, dropped his bag at his feet, and was still unzipping his jacket when she appeared. "Hi there. What can I get you?" She was young, early 20s maybe, with bright eyes and a smile that had the exact dimensions of a smile without quite being one. Not cold, just precise. A white button-down shirt, a small pad in her hand, her hair pulled back neatly. "Whiskey," he said. "Whatever's open." "Coming right up." She moved away. He watched the room. 3 booths along the wall, 2 occupied. In the far corner, a man sat alone with a beer he wasn't drinking, staring at the table with the concentration of someone trying to remember something important. Near the door, a couple leaned together over a shared plate of fries, talking quietly. Normal. All of it normal. A glass appeared in front of him. "Here you go. Can I get you anything else?" He turned. Different girl. Same white shirt. Same pulled-back hair. Same smile with its careful geometry. He looked toward the back of the bar. The first waitress was gone. "Just the drink," he said. "You got it." He wrapped his hands around the glass and didn't drink it right away. That was a habit from the military. Not the whiskey, but the pause before the whiskey. Just to make sure you knew where you were. He knew where he was. He was in a bar in a town he'd never been to before and would never come back to. He was nobody here, which was fine. Being nobody was restful. Someone settled onto the stool beside him. He registered it without looking. A man, older, wearing a jacket that had been expensive once. He smelled like rain and cigarettes. "First time here?" the man said. Decker looked at him. Late 50s maybe. A face that had done a lot of living and wasn't necessarily proud of all of it. Gray at the temples. Eyes that were paying close attention. That obvious? You're watching the room. The man extended a hand. "Harlan, Decker." He shook it. "You a regular?" Harlan looked at his own glass for a moment. "I've been here before," he said, which wasn't quite an answer. "Hi there, what can I get you?" Same voice, same tone, same angle of the head. Decker looked up, and the girl behind the counter was smiling at Harlan, pad ready, and she was young with bright eyes and a white button-down shirt, and her hair pulled back neatly. He was almost certain she hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. He was almost certain she was the same girl who'd brought him his glass, or the same girl who'd greeted him when he sat down, except there was something about the eyes that was slightly different from both. Not the color, but the depth of them, the way they aimed at you. "Just water, thanks," Harlan said. Coming right up, she vanished around a corner that Decker was fairly sure didn't have a back room behind it, just a wall. "Tell me something," Decker said quietly. "Third one tonight," Harlan said. "I've counted." Decker drank. The whiskey was good. Better than the bar deserved, honestly. He set the glass down and turned it slowly in his fingers. "What's the record?" he said. "A man I spoke to last winter said he got to 7 before he left." He left, Harlan agreed. The rain tapped at the window. The couple near the door laughed at something, and the sound was warm and human, and made Decker feel, briefly, the full weight of everything that had brought him to a bar stool in a strange town at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. "You think about leaving?" he asked. Harlan looked at him with an expression that was patient and tired in equal measure. "I think about a lot of things." The water appeared. Different hands set it down. He was sure of that. He'd been watching, and when he looked up, the smile was the same, and the shirt was the same, and the hair was the same, and she said, "Can I get you anything else?" With precisely the inflection of the question before it and the one before that. "No thank you," Harlan said. "You got it, gone." Decker put both elbows on the bar. He had a way of thinking in the field that the men under his command had called his audit face. Still and quiet, running numbers. He ran numbers now. 3 waitresses so far, in maybe 25 minutes. Bar this size needed 1 server, maybe 2 on a busy night. This wasn't a busy night. The 2 booths were still occupied. Same people. Nobody had ordered anything as far as he could tell. Nobody had been served. The couple's fries hadn't changed. The man in the corner's beer was at the same level as when Decker walked in. "The people in the booths," he said. "Don't bother," Harlan said. "I tried talking to them about an hour ago." They respond. They smile. They say things that sound like answers. He paused. "They're not really there." Decker looked at the couple. The woman was laughing again. The man pushed a fry across the plate. It was a perfect scene of 2 people at dinner. "Bait," Decker said. "I think so, yes." "For what?" Harlan picked up his water glass, put it down without drinking. "That," he said, "is what I keep coming back to try to figure out." Decker had spent 11 years running asset recovery in environments where the other side had home field advantage. He had walked into rooms specifically designed to disorient him, spaces built to make him feel surveilled and small. He knew what a controlled environment felt like from the inside, and this was one. The sign outside with its blinking O, the rain that drove you in, the whiskey that was better than it should be, the people in the booths that created the comfortable noise of an ordinary place, the waitresses that kept coming. "What do they want from us?" he said. "Best I can work out?" Harlan turned on his stool to face him properly. "Information. Not the kind you'd think. Not names and numbers, behavior, reaction. They're watching how we respond to the repetition, to the wrongness of it. I think they're trying to understand what happens when a human notices something that should break them and doesn't." "You're not broken." "No," Harlan said, "and I think that bothers them quite a lot." "Hi there. What can I get you?" Number 5. Decker didn't flinch, didn't startle, didn't do anything except turn and look. The girl was smiling. The shirt was white, the hair was back. The eyes were aimed at the precise point on his face that indicated attentiveness. He studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. He watched the smile not waver, watched the eyes not shift, watched the posture hold, and then he said, "What's your name?" A pause, tiny, barely a beat, like a signal taking a fraction of a second longer to arrive. "I'm your waitress." "I know," he said, "but what's your name?" The smile maintained its geometry. "Can I get you a refill on that whiskey?" "Sure," he said, "thank you." She moved away. He looked at Harlan. Harlan was watching him with something that might have been the beginning of hope. "The pause," Decker said. "Yes. Every time you ask something they don't have a prepared response for, there's a pause. They're querying something. Somewhere, yes. The answers come from somewhere else." Decker thought about that. He thought about the architecture of it. Not the bar, the system. Whatever had built this place had built it carefully, with patience, with an attention to human behavior that suggested long study. The comfortable smells, the good whiskey, the laughter from the booths. Everything calibrated to keep a human relaxed and unguarded. What it hadn't accounted for, or maybe hadn't yet fully accounted for, was the specific variety of human who'd spent a decade getting comfortable in places designed to be uncomfortable. The refill appeared. He thanked her. She said, "You got it," and was gone, and he was fairly sure she hadn't walked away, that the going was more abrupt than that, a kind of edit, a cut, but he couldn't be certain. "You've been here before," Decker said to Harlan. "More than once, you said." "4 times now." "Why do you keep coming back?" Harlan looked at the door, at the rain beyond the glass. "Same reason you walked in instead of waiting in your car," he said. "I want to understand what this is. I've wanted to understand things my whole life, and this is the strangest thing I've ever encountered, and I'm old enough now that I don't imagine something stranger is coming along." He glanced sideways. "What about you? Why are you still here?" Decker considered the question honestly. "Because something in this room doesn't know what I am yet," he said, "and I'd like to keep it that way a little longer." Harlan smiled. It was the first real smile Decker had seen all night, crooked and worn and entirely human, and it made the controlled warmth of the booth couple's laughter sound like a recording of a laugh, which was probably what it was. "I've been pushing at the edges," Harlan said quietly, testing responses. The pauses come most often on questions about origin, where they're from, who owns the bar, how long it's been open. There's a longer pause on questions about time. I asked the fourth one what year it was, and she stood perfectly still for 4 seconds before she said, "Can I get you another drink?" 4 seconds is an eternity for a cover story. Yes. So whatever's running them has gaps in its model. Decker turned the empty glass in his fingers. It knows enough about human service culture to build the surface, but time is harder. Because time is contextual. You'd need to have really been here, actually lived in this moment, to know what year it feels like. That's what I concluded. What else did you test? Harlan reached into his jacket and produced a small notebook, the old kind, spiral-bound, the pages dense with small handwriting. Decker looked at it with a feeling that was close to affection. "You brought a notebook." "I'm a historian," Harlan said, without embarrassment. "I always bring a notebook." He flipped through pages. Decker could see columns of observations, notes in the margins, question marks, circles around certain words. "Emotion," Harlan read. "No response above baseline to expressions of grief, fear, or anger. Positive responses to contentment and mild humor. It reinforces those. It's trying to keep us calm and pleasantly engaged." Memory. References to specific shared memories produce the longest pauses. "I told the seventh one about my wife, described the way she laughed at a particular joke I used to tell, and the waitress stood still for 6 seconds before she reset." He paused. She said, "That sounds lovely," which is technically correct and completely empty. "It doesn't have access to personal memory," Decker said. "It can model the category of wife, the category of joke, the category of laughter. But it can't access the specific." "The specific is where we live," Harlan said. Decker thought of a river in Kandahar, the color the water went at a particular time of afternoon, a color he'd never seen anywhere else and couldn't describe accurately to anyone who hadn't been there. He thought of the sound of laughter from the far end of a barracks at 2 in the morning. The shape of it, the way it changed depending on who was laughing and why. He thought of 10,000 specifics that lived in his body and his memory and could not be queried from the outside because they weren't stored anywhere a system could reach. 11 waitresses, he said. "I've been counting." "What happens at 11? Harlan said. "Assuming something does. I don't know. But it's the number that brought you back 4 times. A silence. Rain on the window. The couple near the door were still laughing, perpetually, cheerfully, in a loop that Decker now couldn't stop hearing as a loop. "Hi there, what can I get you?" He turned without hurrying. Number 6. He looked at her for a long time. Really looked. The way he'd learned to look in rooms that were trying to deceive him, cataloging small details, the way the light caught her, the way her chest didn't quite rise and fall the way a chest should. When someone was breathing normally, the way her smile had no relationship to the muscles around her eyes, the way her weight was too evenly distributed on both feet because she wasn't actually favoring one side, wasn't actually tired, wasn't actually a person who'd been on her feet all night. "I have a question," he said. "Of course, not a drink order, a question." The smile held. "I'll do my best. How many of us have you seen come through here?" Pause. Longer than the ones Harlan described. 3 seconds, maybe 4. "We get all kinds of folks. That's not an answer. Can I get you?" "No," he said quietly. "Let me ask it differently. How many have stayed past the 10th waitress?" The pause this time was different. Longer. Yes, but with something in the quality of the stillness that hadn't been there before. The smile was still in place, but the eyes, for just a fraction of a second, were doing something that wasn't aimed at him at all, looking inward or upward, or somewhere the face wasn't built to show. Then, "You got it," and she was gone in a way that was definitely an edit. He was certain of it this time. Harlan was writing in his notebook. "She didn't reset to a drink offer," he said. "No, that's new." Decker picked up his refill, drank half of it, put it down. Whatever this is, it hasn't seen someone push past the question before. People get uncomfortable and leave, or they convince themselves there's an explanation, or they stop asking. He looked at the notebook, or they ask but not like that. Like what? Like they know the answer and just want confirmation. He watched the corner where the waitresses disappeared. Information moves through a system both ways. You can use a query to tell the system what you know. Harlan was quiet for a moment. You're going to provoke it. I'm going to let it know, Decker said, that at least two of us can see the room, that we're not confused, and we're not frightened, and we're not going to give it clean data. And I want to see what it does when it realizes the observation is running both ways. That could go badly. Yes, Decker said. So could most things. He finished the whiskey, felt the warmth of it settle in his chest, that specific warmth that was particular to this glass in this bar on this rainy night, a specific thing no system could replicate. Tell me about your wife, he said. Harlan blinked. What? Tell me something specific about her, something small, the kind of thing nobody else would know. Harlan looked at him, then at the notebook, then at some middle distance that had nothing in the bar. She used to fold the corner of the last page she'd read, he said slowly, even in library books, which she knew was wrong. She'd smooth it out again before she returned them, but you could still see the crease. He was quiet a moment. She said she was always afraid she'd forget where she'd stopped. Hold on to that, Decker said. That exact thing. Don't let the room have it. The next waitress arrived before either of them heard footsteps. Number 7, 8, 9. They came faster now, as if the system were running a different protocol, and each one appeared and offered and disappeared in a shorter cycle, their smiles narrowing fractionally, their pauses disappearing because they weren't being asked questions anymore. Decker and Harlan were talking to each other quietly and specifically about things that had actually happened to them. Decker talked about the river in Kandahar, the color it went at a particular time of afternoon. Harlan talked about a Tuesday in 1987 when he'd found a first edition in a junk shop and felt, for a moment, like the world had left him a gift. The waitresses kept coming. The booths stayed static. The rain kept up its rhythm on the glass. 10. The 10th waitress lingered a half-beat longer than the others before she vanished. Decker watched the corner where she'd gone and counted to 5, and nothing appeared. That's 10, Harlan said. I know. Neither of them spoke. The bar hummed its bar hum. The couple in the booth had stopped laughing. Had gone still, in fact, with the exact stillness of objects that have been paused. Then, from somewhere that wasn't behind the bar, a sound, not a voice, not footsteps. Something the room did. A kind of exhale, a shift in pressure that Decker felt in his sinuses and the backs of his teeth. The neon sign outside stopped flickering. The O held steady. The 11th waitress came from the direction of the door. She looked like the others in every particular, except that she wasn't smiling. And this somehow was the most frightening thing Decker had seen all night. Not frightening like danger, but frightening like standing at the edge of something vast and being forced to reckon with its actual size. She stopped 3 feet from where he sat and looked at him, and the eyes were different. Not human, not inhuman in the horror movie way, not wrong like a broken doll. Just different, with a depth to them that suggested she was not looking at him from inside the bar, but from somewhere very far away, through a very small hole. You're aware, she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was smooth and careful, not cheerful, not performed. The voice of something that had stopped performing because performance was no longer the appropriate mode. We're aware, Decker said. She looked at Harlan, looked at his notebook. The notebook seemed to interest her. Or whatever was looking through her seemed interested. The record observations, she said, prior to your visit, 7. The man last winter, Harlan said quietly. He left at 7, a pause. You were at 10, you did not leave. No, Decker said. We didn't. The modeling parameters did not predict this. She turned her eyes back to him. and there was something in the quality of the attention that was enormous, like being looked at by something that had been studying his species for a very long time and had just encountered a data point its models hadn't included. We have observed 642 visits to this installation over a period you would understand as 40 years. The behavioral distribution is consistent. Individuals notice the anomaly. Individuals experience discomfort proportional to their pattern recognition acuity. Individuals leave. This is reliable. This is the data. Except, she was still, not pausing. The pauses were gone, just still in the way of something that was allocating significant resources to what came next. Except, she said, for two individuals in one evening who, and here something happened with her face that was not an expression but was adjacent to one, something that might have been in a human the beginnings of reassessment, who spoke to each other of specific things and could not be modeled. "What do you want from us?" Harlan said. "We want to understand persistence," she said. "We study behavioral response to systemic anomaly. The data suggests that humans, when confronted with evidence of the inexplicable, will rationalize or retreat. This facility was designed to provide a controlled anomaly in a comfortable context. The whiskey is genuine. The music," she paused again, a short one, "we calibrate carefully." "The whiskey's good," Decker said. "Yes. We believed comfort would allow for extended observation before the discomfort threshold drove departure. This has been reliable until tonight. Because we talked to each other," Harlan said. "Because you chose connection over comprehension," she said. "Individually, each of you was processing the anomaly as a solvable system. You," she looked at Decker, "were auditing. You," to Harlan, "were cataloging. These are behaviors we have modeled. But you stopped solving it and started talking to each other about things that had nothing to do with the room." Something moved behind her eyes. "The river, the book. You were listening," Decker said. "We are always listening. We did not know what to do with the data." She looked at the notebook one more time. The woman's reading habit, the page corners. Her voice was entirely without mockery or sentimentality. "That datum appears in no model. It produces no utility. It predicts nothing. You offered it to each other as though it had value." "It does have value," Harlan said quietly and without qualification. The bar was very still. The couple in the booth had not moved in several minutes. The rain had slowed. Decker put both hands flat on the bar. He thought about what he knew of first contact protocols, of negotiation in environments where you were out-resourced and out-positioned. He thought about the principle he'd returned to again and again in 11 years of operating at a disadvantage. That the most dangerous thing you could ever offer an adversary was clarity about what you were. "We're not going to stop doing that," he said. "Talking like that. Being specific. Being particular. It's not a tactic. It's just what we are." She looked at him for a very long time. "We know," she said. "This is why the data is not useful. You are not." And here she stopped, and the stop felt genuine, felt like something real was happening in whatever was behind her. "You are not behaving as a species under observation. You are behaving as a species that is aware of being observed and has decided that the appropriate response is to be more thoroughly itself." "Yeah," Decker said. "We do that." The O in the neon sign outside flickered once and went steady. "We will need to revise the parameters," she said. It might have been to them. It might have been to something listening through her. The behavioral distribution requires expansion. The outlier is not statistical noise. She looked at the notebook in Harlan's hands one last time. "The woman with the books," she said. "What became of her?" Harlan's jaw tightened. "She died," he said. 7 years ago." The 11th waitress stood very still. The question she'd asked had not been strategic. Decker was fairly sure of that. Whatever was happening in the enormous distance behind her eyes was not, at this moment, data collection. "We are sorry," she said. The geometry of the line was perfect, the delivery was smooth. But the pause before it had been 4 seconds, and Decker had learned to pay attention to pauses, and this one felt less like a system querying a database. and more like something that had encountered a fact that required a moment to hold. It could have been performance. He wasn't certain it was. She stepped back toward the door. The room began to breathe again. Small sounds returning, the couple in the booth unfreezing into their tableau, the rain picking up. "We will leave the light on," she said, which also might have been to something else entirely, or might have been the system's version of goodbye, grabbed from the database of human warmth and deployed here, now with whatever intent a thing that far away was capable of. The door opened. She was gone. The rain was steady and ordinary. Harlan looked at his notebook. Decker looked at his empty glass. After a while, Harlan said, "You think they'll come back?" "Yes," Decker said, with better questions. "What do we do in the meantime?" Decker considered this with the particular seriousness he gave to questions that actually mattered. "We go home," he said. "We live our lives. We accumulate more data points they can't model." He picked up his empty glass and set it down gently. "We remember specific things and tell them to people we trust." Harlan tucked the notebook into his jacket. He looked once more at the booths. The couple, the still man in the corner. And Decker thought he saw something shift in the tableau. Some tiny adjustment, as if the whole room were listening. Let it listen. That was fine. That was the thing they hadn't counted on, or hadn't counted on correctly. That being watched didn't change what you were. That a man with a notebook and a man with an audit face, sitting in a bar in the rain, talking about a woman who folded corners of library pages and as a river that went a color words couldn't hold. That this was not a vulnerability. This was the data point that didn't fit. This was the thing they'd have to come back to study. Decker put on his jacket, zipped it up, stood. "My car's dead," he said. "I'll give you a lift," Harlan said. They walked out together into the rain. Behind them, the O in the sign kept its steady light. The bar sat quiet and patient, waiting, the way things that study species wait, for the next visitor, the next anomaly to observe. It didn't occur to the system, perhaps, that it had already found what it was looking for, and that what it was looking for was exactly this. Two people walking away into the dark, unhurried and unbroken, talking about something that had nothing to do with the room.